world. I'm Steve Rao, the host of Pod and Roku TV's World Edition. I greet you live, no, not from the nation's capital, from North Carolina, the eighth largest state in the union, but I'm here today to talk about some game-changing news, and we'll be talking about it tonight in a little bit more depth on world politics, which I will be opening up and being for most of the hour this evening at 5 p.m. I'm going to open up today with some of the big events, and then I'll be here for a few minutes today. But first of all, the world was shocked when, well, we really shouldn't be shocked, but Mitch McConnell, United States Senator and Minority Leader of the United States Senate, announced he will be stepping down as Minority Leader this year. This comes as a very, very big news to the United States Congress and Senate. It also leads to question who will take his place at the helm and whether any kind of normalcy in politics is now gone, as McConnell, although he's very conservative, really was emerging as more of a centrist. He still supports funding Ukraine and obviously is facing significant resistance in the Senate. We will see what happens. And speaking of that, his party's forebear, Donald Trump, the former president, every day that passes is inching closer and closer to the Republican nomination, having won Michigan and South Carolina. He will be now coming to North Carolina for some rallies along with Nikki Haley. And this former president faces 91 felony charges. 91, folks. And he's still winning. Now, what's interesting is that the Supreme Court is looking at whether or not he should be granted immunity. And we are dealing with potential constitutional crisis if he wins and is convicted, or will he be pardoned while he holds the office of presidency. Ironically, probably what's motivating him to win the presidency is to stay out of jail. And obviously, whatever he's doing is working because he is winning and winning significantly. So we're going to talk about that. The other news of the day, and I found it interesting, we've talked about India being the number one economy in the world. Well, guess what? The India's wealthiest man, probably actually one of the wealthiest men in the world, Mukesh Ambani, is buying a 63% stake in a venture merging or investing in Disney. And so this is big news for the Indian streaming market. I could go on and on. Inflation is coming down in France to about 3.5%. And it's the last day of February 29th, a leap year, unless you're watching this somewhere around the world and it's already March 1st. Can't believe we've gone through the first 2 months of the year and we're only a few months away from the presidential election. And just think, this time next year, we'll either have a President Biden or a new president. Well, maybe not so new. Let's go ahead and get started.
Glad to get started with you. I'm going to bring in Rick Rosner and we'll see who else is with us. I know Nick Malveda is with us.
I got to disagree with Steve about Trump winning. Yeah, the polls show Trump with a lead, but the polls are crappy. And Trump has underperformed the polls in all four primary votes so far. The biggest underperformance was just yet 2 days ago in Michigan, where he underperformed the polls by 10%. I think the polls are contaminated by lunatics. All it takes is one lying Trumpy lunatic claiming to be a Biden voter to contaminate in 40. 1 out of 40 survey respondents. If 1 out of 40 is a lunatic, that's enough to move the margin between Trump and Biden by 5%. So I'm not buying the polls.
But on the Republican, it doesn't matter. So they said he's supposed to win by 25. He wins by 15. A win is a win. So, when you get such a large lead, it just really doesn't matter. Nikki Haley.
That's true in terms he's going to win the nomination. But if he's underperforming the polls, it also means the polls of him versus Biden are likely overestimating the support he has.
Yeah, that's probably true. So it'll be a closer election than people think. I think it's going to be a close election no matter what people think is going to happen out there. And because November 5th, anything can happen between now and then. So it's not automatic. I do think Nikki Haley is going to get wiped out on March the 5th, and she will withdraw. What they call it, they suspend their campaign.
It's independent campaigns, and then there's people that are speculating that she might be trying to go for a vice presidency, but a lot of people are saying that they are too much at each other's throats for that to happen.
Yeah.
But who knows what happens in
She's
Well,
going to run out of.
I have a
Bedfellows.
reliable source from the inside that has confirmed to me that Nikki Haley will be the vice presidential nominee.
What? Vice president of who? For Trump?
Yep,
Or
it's a done deal.
Biden?
It's all theatrics.
I don't see them kissing and making up.
No,
I-
it's their only path to victory. It has to be.
No. You know, she's supported by Coke money, and Donald is Donald because he doesn't seem to care about anything except himself. So he's going to choose the prettiest girl in the room, and it's not going to be Nikki Haley. It'll be one of those other young ladies out there. Well, you know, just see what happens, and it'll happen shortly after when Trump needs another bump in the polls. He'll run and
Well,
announce.
speaking of Nick, speaking of bumps in the polls and everything, apparently the two candidates, because it does look like that's the candidates that we are heading to, are actually near each other. Apparently, I had heard today, and they may be near each other when they come to North Carolina. But I think this trip is actually Texas because they are doing dueling border visits. So apparently, Trump and Biden are both going to Texas because the border issue is an important issue. So I understand from reading things in both the New York Times and CNN and other places that they are going to be there and not that far apart from each other, but they will have different views on the immigration. And I know we've talked about immigration a number of times here on the show and everything, but I just wondering if people's take on this, because apparently they are very much concerned about these swing states. I know that Kamala will be in Durham tomorrow, and I know that there are several other trips from both the Biden.
Do we know where she's going yet? Because I'm supposed to go to that. Do we know where
They're
she's
supposed to
going?
be meeting with Kamala Harris this week.
Yeah, I'm meeting her tomorrow, but I don't know where it is.
Oh, that's really good. You're meeting her tomorrow, and you have no idea where you're going to meet her.
No, they don't give it you last minute, but they don't allow.
Oh,
I checked, Nick. They don't allow any cameras. Nothing. Nothing.
Oh, really?
You have to have White House press credentials. Unfortunately.
Why you need White House press credentials? You know, we're getting everybody United Nations press credentials.
Yeah, but they wouldn't. I mean, they're just really.
I guess United Nations won't work as being press from the United Nations.
No.
We have to do a certain amount of things with the UN to get. We've broadcast with them before. But we have to do a certain amount of things like broadcast 6 times with the United Nations to get their credentials.
That'll get us into
United Nations. You know, let me in. No, we won't let you in. We don't care about the United Nations. But
that'll get us into the Modi visit to New York, right?
oh, do you have tape on that?
He's coming, and all I know is he's coming to New York in September, I think.
Oh, really?
Is he coming to speak at the UN?
Yeah.
Really, at the UN? Hey, by that time, you'll have UN press credentials, Steve, so that you can get in and film. We're working on that as of yesterday to get our people, let our people go and be part of the United Nations for whatever reason that is.
But what are our thoughts about this visit? Because, like I said, it's separate events. It is on the border of Texas. It's actually literally today. So today being
it's a big
leap day and everything. So they are planning contrasting goals and clashing messages, but they are both going there. I'm sure that Mr. Trump will be talking about this wall that he wants to build, and that some of his candidates are saying that they would back the building of the wall, including some from right here in North Carolina and all along those lines. But Americans will get their first look at the likely presidential rematch coming this fall, as we were just saying and everything, when they are going to be going on the Texas border today, a rare convergence of those campaign trails and all along those lines. But definitely looks like they're going to be there, and they're going to be talking about this political edge issue and all along those lines. But what are our takes on that? Because apparently Mr. Trump is more trusted on immigration by a sizable 16 percentage points, according to, I know, Rick
America's greatest builder,
and all along those lines. But definitely the margin has more than doubled to 35 percentage points as of this January, and that's the largest advantage that existed in that kind of staple and everything. So just wondering y'all's thoughts, one, about him being trusted on the immigration issue, and whether this might be a swing issue.
So in 4 years as president, this great builder built 52 miles of wall for a 2,000-mile border. That's 13 miles a year. At that rate, it would take Trump another 150 years to complete the border wall.
Yeah, but that's because he didn't really have the funding. He was actually shifting money from the Defense Department to do it. If he got the funding, it wouldn't take him long at all to build the border. And this is a winning issue for the Republicans. That's the reason they're pressing it. We know Texas is solidly Trump country, so he doesn't need to go to Texas to win Texas. He'll win Texas anyway. It's the rest of the states, and their message is going to be, and it's already starting to happen. A lot of the people that are coming in illegally are murdering citizens of the United States. Not that many, maybe 3 or 4, but they make 3 or 4 sound like 3,000 or 4,000. Their messaging is pretty strong. So Biden's going to lose
the message that was going on with the whole Georgia case, because the woman that got killed in Georgia, the young student, and apparently was killed by somebody that was from a Latin American country. And by the way, they said that border crossings set a monthly record of nearly 250,000 in December. Mr. Biden and Mr. Trump are visiting Texas border town, hundreds of miles apart. Mr. Biden is headed to the Brownsville area, and Mr. Trump will be in Eagle Pass, where Greg Abbott, the Republican governor, has been clashing with federal officials. So they're having a whole debate with the federal government over there in Eagle Pass. So definitely it sounds like Mr. Trump announced his visit first, and then Mr. Biden followed, though the president said on Monday he was unaware his predecessor would be there. What I didn't know is my good friend apparently is going, is what Mr. Biden said and everything.
Well, you know, the thing is, I took a sales course zillions of years ago, and they said human animals are real simple. They're motivated by 2 factors. One is fear. If you can get their fear button going, you move the animal. It's like my dog. If she's scared, she'll do something. 2 is greed. They're greedy. They want something for nothing. Okay, so if you can get that something for nothing going, you can motivate the human animal. So in terms of intellect, forget it. You know, you might as well be dealing with a dog. So Donald Trump, not really consciously, but unconsciously understands human motivation, fear, and greed. So does the Republican Party. So they're going to be playing off the fear card, which is immigration. Now let's go to the greed card. Biden economics, especially with food prices so high, they're going to say, look what happened. You know, the economy is going bad, and you're not getting anything out of the economy. So now all of a sudden he's losing on the economic issue. So he's losing on the 2 major issues that most Americans today care about. So talk to me. How does he have a chance against Donald Trump?
Well, it'll be interesting to see. And some people are trying to figure out how he's going to do it. I mean, I'm sure that in some cases he's going to go and say that the economy is not as bad as you are painting it to be and everything. And there are some indicators that are saying that there are things that are doing better in the economy, including some of the job creation and other things. So, like I said,
I'll be back in about 20 minutes. All right, I'll be back in 20 minutes.
Okay, well, yeah, we'll see. We'll see you, Steve.
See you about 20 minutes.
Mark, have you been to the grocery store lately? You know,
No,
I mean, the thing is,
I've definitely been to restaurants and all along those lines. But like I said, there are other indicators that are out there that are supposedly better, including job creation and a number of other things out there. And, you know, we can even argue that part of the price raised in the grocery store isn't necessarily because of national policies, but it's also because of international and supply chain issues as well. And speaking of which, I did want to get to something in that lane and everything, and I was going to bring it up earlier, but we know that part of the reason that the Israel-Palestine war started was because of that horrendous act that took place last year. But now it seems like there might be some tit for tat, because apparently there was some notion of what was going on, because there was a mass slaughter from the Israel side this time, and apparently they killed a number of Palestinians that were waiting for aid. So they were waiting for aid, and the count has gone up in the death of those Palestinians and all along those lines. So Rick, I was wondering your take on that, because when I heard that, I was going like, wait a minute, that you're going to fire on folks that are trying to get grain or milk or water or whatever other kind of aid they were trying to get and everything. But you follow the news just like I do and everything. I was just wondering what your take is.
Sorry, we've had Spectrum for 20 years in this house, and we still get crappy service. I don't know if you can even hear me.
Yes.
But 30,000 Gazans have been killed now by Israel. most of them, if you believe the statistics, and I kind of do, women and children, only 10,000 of them Hamas.
Right.
This latest thing was 100 Gazans rented a truck that was bringing food into Gaza and swarmed it, and the Israelis felt threatened and they fired into the crowd. I'm Jewish. I support Israel's right to exist, but Netanyahu is an asshole who's trying to save his political career by crushing Gaza. And certainly Hamas deserves to be crushed and obliterated, but they're doing it in a way that kills a lot of people who are not Hamas. And they're destroying.
But the U.S. does that all the time. I mean, the thing is, this was Netanyahu's argument. Remember when George Bush goes, "Oh, there's weapons of mass destruction in Iraq," and they invaded Iraq. They killed over 1 million Iraqis. And so the U.S. does it with impunity, and nobody blinks except the Chinese who say it's wrong. But the world doesn't blink. The minute Israel does it, it's like, oh, it's the horrible things of that, And I go, wait a minute. This is what they call war, baby. I mean, war is hell.
War is hell, but Nick, I can't agree with something you just said, because I do remember a lot of people giving flack to the U.S. and even George Bush when there was killing going on in Afghanistan. So I can't say. Matter of fact, some people would argue that was part of the reason that Obama got elected, because there were people then that were definitely frustrated by some of the policies of the United States, including Afghanistan. So I cannot say and agree with you 100% that the world theater did not kind of condemn some of the things that were being done.
It's common in war, the thing is, you have collateral damage. It happened when the North invaded the South. Okay, they came and they burned the farms, they killed the farmers and stuff like that. Why aren't we crying for the Confederate soldiers and the Confederacy, that the people that were slaughtered by the Northern Yankees, Mark? Why aren't we doing that?
Well, we've had some people that have done that. I mean, there are entire organizations that have done that as well. So there have been folks that have done that totally and all along those lines. And there are even some historical groups that are still doing it to this day and everything. And by the way, speaking of the war and the nature of war, your good friend and Trump's good friend has said that if NATO sends troops into Ukraine, there will be nuclear war. So Putin warns of a nuclear war if NATO sends troops into Ukraine.
I want to talk more about Gaza. Is only 150 square miles. Israel has 300,000 troops, and Hamas is down to 15,000. So they can, I feel that Israel could be more selective in their, and just because the U.S. killed a ton more people than if Saddam Hussein had been left in place, doesn't excuse, just because we did horrible stuff, doesn't excuse Israel from sloppily killing. I think they could be more selective.
In the perfect world, Rick, you're right. But the thing is, this is not a perfect world. So
but speaking of a perfect world, there was a war way back in the late 60s, and there was definitely several in the 70s and all along those lines that were expanded wars. And apparently even the folks in the Biden camp and other camps are concerned that the war may be
Mark, you got frozen. So Rick,
between
you're
Israel and Hamas.
Lee is asking, do I trust Hamas
with Hezbollah and everything along those lines?
So Lee asks, do I trust Hamas numbers? And, I wouldn't until I looked into it. And it turns out, Hamas is, this isn't the first go round. It's the most deadly go round between Israel and Hamas. And they've looked at the Hamas numbers historically, like the Red Crescent goes in there, which is the Muslim Red Cross afterwards, and they audit the casualties. And it turns out historically, the Hamas numbers are not far off from the audited numbers that are taken after the conflict ends. So yeah, I mostly trust these numbers, even though, Hamas would be tempted to exaggerate for political reasons. But, It's not like they're doubling or tripling the numbers. If Hamas says so.
And along those same lines, then that's what I brought up even with Ukraine and the parallels, because people sometimes say that there is no parallel, but I actually argue that there is a parallel, because even some of the articles I've been reading, including some from European sources and everything, are saying that no one is really telling Israel what a war with Hezbollah would be like, because I actually think that would be more of a guerrilla type warfare, even more so than what they've dealt with Hamas. So if they are expanding into Lebanon and some of the surrounding area, it could be a much longer war, I'm afraid of, and everything similar to what's going on in Ukraine and Russia. And it also could be one that they might bite off more than they can chew. And all along those lines, if I can use that kind of analogy, kind of framework of talking and everything.
And war is exciting to talk about by the media. Here's something that's not, and Rick brought this up, and as I look at the data, it does appear to be right. How about in the United States, 100,000 fentanyl deaths? Now, this is something we could actually do something about.
A year, every freaking year.
Yeah, 3 times the amount that have been killed in the Ukraine war by the Russians. We do this in a year. Now, this is something because it doesn't attract media. It's some kid out there that just overdosed and died. We just don't care about. Now,
no, but we just had a major case recently, because I believe that there was a group of students that are. But hold on a second. You can't say that that's not. But Nick, you can't say that we're not taking it seriously, because I want to say that there was a case. I want to say that involved UNC, that those students are now facing some serious charges because they killed a student with fentanyl laced product. I think it might have been fentanyl laced cocaine, if I remember correctly, and everything, but definitely it was fentanyl laced, whatever it was. And I just read earlier today that those students are now about to face some serious charges, including, I think, some murder charges, and all along those lines.
They should.
Life may be ending in that sense.
Now, I'm not a drug dealer, but to me, it seems ridiculous to lace Coke with fentanyl. A, because it kills people, and B, because Coke is an upper. It's supposed to make you more energetic, and fentanyl is a downer. So what the heck?
Yeah, and let me just double check that. I just know it was a UNC case, which is University of North Carolina, but I would double check to make sure I'm giving you the correct information. But I do know that they are definitely facing criminal charges, because that just came down.
Yeah, but the thing is, Mark. Okay, so it's a slow news day today. Let's get real. So the news, what they covered was the weather. When it's a slow news day, they cover weather or fires in Texas, in places where no one lives. So they're burning a lot of desert. Who gives a rat's rear? Fentanyl, which happens every day in the United States, which is a serious problem, but doesn't attract a lot of media, is killing 100,000 people a year in the U.S. There are certain solutions like Narcan, and we're going to bring on Roman Gabriel, who's actually a quarterback's son or grandson, to discuss these particular issues, because his goal is to bring Narcan to all the schools and make sure everybody is aware that you have potential life-saving devices out there that you need to use. Even as a whole website on these issues. All this stuff is being buried by the media because it doesn't get ratings.
Well, no, they talked about. I've heard them talk about fentanyl. I've heard them talk about it with some of the things. Like I just said, 2 are literally heading to prison, and it was. I was corrected. It was fentanyl laced cocaine, and I hear what you're saying. That those are 2 things that are kind of opposite of each other, but definitely opposite effects and all along those lines. But it killed a UNC student, and they said that 2 people who sold fentanyl-laced cocaine that killed a college student from Charlotte are going to prison. So Gracie Burton, a 19-year-old freshman at the University of North Carolina, died last March after doing cocaine laced with fentanyl, and prosecutors said that Cy Frazier, better known to Duke University and the UNC college students as the barber due to his former job, added fentanyl to cocaine. Then they said he sold it to students like Burton with the help of his girlfriend, Carlisa Allen. And on Wednesday, Frazier was sentenced to 29 years in prison. And earlier this month, Allen was sentenced to 28 years in prison.
Yeah,
so
not a solution. Not a solution. Sorry. The person's already dead. You throw somebody in prison for 28 years, who gives a rat's rear?
So what is the solution?
Narcan. I mean, what you have to do is distribute the antidote all over the place to lessen the deaths, rather than sit there and ignore this. Bring Narcan to the schools and to individuals and know how to use it and know when
I
somebody's
mean,
suffering.
the problem with that, Nick, and I don't know I mean, I know what Narcan is because I've watched enough TV dramas and particularly crime dramas to see how it works. But I'm thinking that there are some people that, some of the things that are supposed to be solutions can also be turned into the problem as well. So I'm thinking that even though Narcan is supposed to give you this boost on reversing the fentanyl, my fear, and I don't know enough about Narcan, is that is there the possibility that the Narcan itself can be misused and definitely kind
Well,
of used in a negative way?
I'm guessing that Narcan is like a giant jolt of adrenaline.
That's what I was
Yeah.
guessing. Exactly.
Similar to
So,
something
I mean,
like
so if somebody hits you, you go to the dentist, when they numb your mouth, the anesthetic, unless you ask it not to be, is full of adrenaline. So, I mean, you get hit with adrenaline, you get revved. I don't think it's going to really mess you up if it's used improperly.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it is a federal program to fund Narcan in every school.
Yeah, we need to do that, and also we need to look at antidotes. And the other thing we need to do, educate the kids, because they're basically taking poison, high poison. They don't know that, and actually create a system where, yeah, they do tell when they see somebody who is rolling around their little pink pills that the thing is this could be fentanyl. That's a highly dangerous, poisonous drug that kills 100,000 people a year. So what we need to do is do a full press on this. Instead of doing a full press, we're doing nothing. The media isn't doing anything. Our lawmakers aren't doing anything. We're being very complicit. Now,
Well, you can't say they're not doing anything because I just read recently, and I think that this is in the.
We're talking about
Hold on a second.
30,000 people dying in Israel. Who gives a rat's rear? 100,000 people
No,
are
but
dying.
you said it. Hold on. You said that you'll be glad to know this, Nick. You say that people are not doing anything, but just around the corner. So you think that people are not doing it, and sometimes we are critical of our universities. I'm not saying we don't need to be critical of them, but as I am now looking at information and everything, it was done a few days ago that Duke University installed 1 box emergency kits, each equipped with 2 doses of the opioid overdose reversal drug Narcan across residential facilities on both East and West campuses in a new initiative focused on incoming student safety. So there is literally Narcan on the campus of the university at Duke University, and I'm sure that other universities
it should be like all over the place.
Well, because apparently there's been a nation. What the quote said from the associate director there at Duke, Joelle Sarah Campbell, and maybe we can get her on the show, is there has been a nationwide increase in the presence of fentanyl in various substances, and it is possible students could come in contact with this substance unintentionally, exposing them to the risk of potential overdose, even without intentional opioid use. Following consultation with students and campus stakeholders, 41 box emergency kits have been strategically placed in East and West campus dorms, each clearly marked with signs for easy identification. And this change comes less than a year after the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill first-year student had that fatal overdose. So, and like I said, I'm sure that other campuses around the country will be doing something similar. So if we can't get it from the national folks, then sometimes the agencies themselves, in this case Duke, are taking the lead themselves. So definitely it is definitely there. Apparently there was even some things dealing with the barriers, because it says despite the importance of Narcan, barriers currently exist on campus that limits its distribution as the only FDA approved over-the-counter drug containing naloxone. It can be difficult to distribute the medication for free. The over-the-counter dosage is $40 per dose, which can start to add up when you're looking at 70,000 undergraduates at Duke.
I think the colleges can afford it. A lot of colleges.
Wait, Mark, did I hear this right? It's $40 to save someone's life. I don't know. That's really expensive. Maybe we shouldn't distribute it.
So if you go by the 275 people OD on fentanyl or opioids on average in America every day. Colleges have these rape phones, these blue lights that if you're walking through campus and you feel unsafe, you can go to a blue light and there's a phone there and you can say, "Hey, help! I need somebody to And if you put the Narcan, next to the blue lights, they should, on campus, you should never be more than, I don't know what, 100 yards away from a Narcan pen. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're really, like I said, the country needs to get serious. But I'm going to now rip apart ABC, CBS, NBC, and PBS. All the major, they don't discuss this at all. Okay, so what is it? What is it in for major media that they decide that this is not a worthy subject to discuss because it's the United States of America? There's only 100,000 people a year dying, and we don't care. In other words, we care about 30,000 Ukrainian soldiers who died, 30,000 Gazan.
Nick, you say that, but I'm pretty sure that I remember. I'm pretty sure I remember Frontline doing a story about it. I'm pretty sure I remember 60 Minutes doing a story about it. So I'm pretty sure I remember several media outlets that are of the major networks that have done stories, and I've definitely heard stories that have been done about it on some of our local media and everything. So I'm not ready to hear you say that they are.
You know how often?
On every day.
You know how often Fox News mentions the border every day?
Oh, I will agree that it is.
100 times.
I will agree that it is underreported, but I'm not going to say that it is not reported. So that's why I'm kind of what Nick is saying. But I will agree it is underreported.
Nick is right. The problem is for-profit news. But news used to be a public service. When TV began, the government says you can use these wavelengths to transmit TV signals, and in return, you have to do a public service for America. That public service was the national news. Started off as
I got you what you're saying, but what do we say when they're, and speaking of CBS, they had a story on earlier today where apparently it was reported 5 hours ago and everything, where apparently in Medford, Oregon, there are officers that are investigating a potential crime because there is a nurse that literally replaced the patient's fentanyl drip, because sometimes fentanyl is actually needed and everything, with tap water, and apparently this led to a death and all along this lines and everything. So in some cases it is a substance that is needed in medical practices and everything. So it's not always just used in bad situations. Sometimes it has legitimate uses, and there is the first lawsuit brought amid reports that a nurse at a Southern Oregon hospital replaced intravenous fentanyl drips with tap water, and they are seeking up to $11.5 million on behalf of the estate of the 65-year-old man who died. So that was filed on Monday against Asante Rogue Regional Medical Center there in that town, and it also named the nurse as a defendant. So they were investigating potential crimes against patients involving the theft of controlled substances, which may have led to adverse outcomes for some. So, it's a synthetic opioid, and it helped fuel the nation's overdose epidemic and all along those lines. But maybe she was trying to get it and then was going to resell it. I don't know the reason that this nurse would have done it, but apparently they are facing some.
Well, yeah, these drugs are useful. Like when I got a colonoscopy, they put me into twilight sleep with the same drug that killed Michael Jackson. Right. And maybe I don't know what killed, but yeah, propofol, fentanyl, all those have therapeutic uses.
And in my neck of the woods, or in one of my old neck of the woods, because it was many years ago when I was in Milwaukee and when I was going to college and all in that space. But there is a national poll taken earlier this year by the group Consumer Action for a Strong Economy of Republicans and Republican-leaning independents, and found that 75% of those voters believe we need a strong U.S. pharmaceutical industry to protect from dangerous counterfeit drugs. So definitely there is 9 out of 10 Americans are concerned about fentanyl trafficking, and it's clear that the overwhelming consensus reflects across the political spectrum. But there is also folks that are wondering about some of the fake versions of these drugs as well.
So you used to be able to go to Mexico, to the border towns, Tijuana, Juarez, and go to the pharmacies there and get drugs for super cheap. But now if you try to do that, you might be endangering your life because the
there was a drug.
Let me just finish. Because the Mexican pharmacies are cutting the drugs with fentanyl.
Well, that's what I was going to say. When I broke my arm back in several years back, it was probably like 10 to 15 years ago, and along those lines, I do remember that there was Percocet. If you ever had any injury, a lot of times people take Percocet, and apparently that's what happened in Wisconsin. So in August of last year, a federal judge in Wisconsin sentenced a Green Bay woman for trafficking fake counterfeit Percocet pills, which were laced with fentanyl, and
Yeah.
this was no rare case. So 60% of the counterfeit Percocet pills tested in 2022 by the Drug Enforcement Administration had a potentially lethal dose of fentanyl, up from 40% in 2021. So if you're getting Percocet, you might not be getting Percocet. You might be getting Percocet laced with fentanyl. So that's the other issue, is trying to regulate when it is being used in different places and in different ways. Because they're even saying new research demonstrates that a growing percentage of fentanyl overdose deaths occur after Americans take one of these laced counterfeit pills. So they're actually taking a legitimate pill, whether it's Percocet, whether it's a nutrition pill, whether it's whatever, but it has been laced with fentanyl. So that's the other issue, is that yes, we can do the thing with the Narcan to kind of alleviate it if you've been hit, but if you're on Percocet and you are taking a pill, by the time the reaction hits you, it might be too late for you. And I hate to be morbid in that sense, but that's what I'm thinking. We've also got to catch it at the root area where it's actually being created, and all along those lines. So there are probably people that are out there doing a number of legitimate pills. Like I said, it might even be some of the diet pills and other pills out there, and they are lacing it with fentanyl.
So for every person who dies in America from a gun, there are nearly 3 people who die from opioids.
Right.
Yeah, and it's abuse, because the thing is, when I was at Duke, they actually gave me fentanyl. Fentanyl is medicinal. They use it all the time. But remember, it's under a controlled situation with a doctor who knows what he's doing. The real problem is we have what I call recreational drugs with people that don't know what they're doing. So what they do is they produce these drugs that are actually harmful. It's like poison. But you, as the consumer who's buying this fentanyl, or like what Mark says, even worse, you didn't think you bought fentanyl, you bought some other pill. It's laced with fentanyl. Those are the people that are dying. And what you're saying, it's a big number, Rick. In other words, 3 times the amount of guns. But see, guns sell on media. So if somebody got shot, well, let's put it on the media. Somebody dies of an overdose of fentanyl, let's bury them and forget about them. And that's the reality of it. It shouldn't be that way, but that's the reality. And there are solutions, but again, they're backdoored, like using Narcan. And the United States needs to get a grip on this. If we don't get a grip on this, what are we doing here? That we allow our media to run amok and not even discuss the issue, except, oh yeah, we did a Frontline show 20 years ago, and it's buried in a
I don't think it was 20 years ago. I think it was more recently, but I hear what you're saying and everything. I do have a question that involves national and international, because, speaking of what we pay attention to, because we pay attention to those 2 conflicts and everything, but there are conflicts all over the world. And apparently there was a African nation that is having, because as you have pointed out, Nick, there are a number of elections this year and everything. And one of them is in the country of Chad, which is in Africa. And apparently it would be almost like if the election happens here in the United States, and it looks like we're heading toward Biden and Trump, and one of them was killed in a shootout, because apparently that's what happened. So Yahya Dillo, the Chad opposition leader, was killed in a shootout. So there was some sort of gun clash, and he was killed. And I guess they'll have to find somebody to replace him in that particular election and everything. But they were getting ready to have this long-awaited election, and now tensions are boiling over in that country. And like I said, it seems like the OK Corral. They had some sort of gun clash.
I mean, it happened here in 1968. Robert Kennedy was running for president, was probably going to win the Democratic nomination, and was assassinated in L.A.
Right. Yep. So it's happened here, and there are some people that we're talking about this rematch, and there are a number of people that are concerned. One, that we're heading toward a civil war. If you look at the border, and you look at a number of other things, and there are a number of people that are concerned that one or both of those candidates, and I'm not wishing ill on either of them, may not make it to the election, because there have definitely been some folks that have speculated that those loonies that you were talking about, 1 or 2 of them may decide to do similar to what they tried to do with Ronald Reagan and Gerald Ford and a number of other folks in that space. So I know that there is security out there. There's CIA. There's a number of other folks. But is there any fear among the 2 of you that there may be the possibility that we don't see either one of them because something horrible happens, and all along those lines?
Well, obviously, security is a lot better than it was in 1968, because we haven't seen any real major problems since then. In other words, the U.S. security and Secret Service has improved it. But more realistically, if something health-wise happens, to one of the two candidates between now and the election.
Mhm.
Because they're both senior candidates. In other words,
Yeah.
Trump's 77, what? Biden's 81, going on 82.
Mhm.
No, but Biden will be 81 through the election. I think he might turn 82 after before he starts his second term. I forget. Trump turns 78 in June. But if you run the actuarial statistics on these guys, it's unlikely that they'll get sick or die, before the election. That, Biden, if you run the stats, he's got another probably 9 years of life left, which is more than enough time to, go through a second term.
Yeah, that's very true. And like I said, Nick, with his pension, understands actualities better than I do, and
Sure, I'll
all
tell you
along
that.
those lines and everything. Speaking of the world and speaking of health, as we're talking about health and everything, there is another small country. I mentioned Chad and everything, but there is some doctors, and apparently there's a lot of doctors over there that are seeing a strike in South Korea, and this is hours left before the return to work deadline ends. So they were asked or being demanded to return to work, and definitely doctors on strike are facing arrest if they do not return to work. So they might be getting prosecuted, but apparently there's a major strike in South Korea. I also understand that they has one of the, and correct me if I'm wrong, Rick, but I think they have one of the lowest fertility rates in the country as well. So that was something else I saw about South Korea, that they are trying to maybe figure out a way to boost their population as opposed to some
A
other
ton
people.
of countries, 25% of the countries on Earth have declining populations, and various reasons. U.S. teens have, I don't know, like 25% young people in America have 25% less sex than they did when I was a kid. I wasn't having any sex because I was nerdy. I wanted to, but nobody would do it with me. But there's just a lot of other stuff going on in the world to distract people from sex. And, some people, economic, like I've said this a million times, but 94% of the privately held wealth in America is held by people 45 years old and over. A lot of younger people, I probably feel too poor to start families.
Yeah,
Well, and apparently that's the issue with South Korea, and I was correct. Hold on a second, Nick. I was correct. South Korea's lowest fertility rate dropped to a new record, so they actually dropped earlier this year and everything. And apparently they are saying that the Asian demographic, and they can say the same thing about us as well, looms larger for its medical system, social welfare provisions, and economic growth. So the number of babies expected per woman in a lifetime fell to 0.72 last year from 0.78 in 2022. And it definitely does sound like it is sliding. And part of that is concerns, like you just mentioned, about growing the fiscal burden. And part of that is, but you'll love this, Nick, because of the financial fiscal burden of public pensions and healthcare. I know that you're in the pension field, but it says from medical services to welfare, demand for spending will increase while fewer taxes will be collected as the number of young people decreases.
It's a big problem media didn't bring up, which is healthcare cost.
Right.
In the United States, we spend more than any other first world country, like twice as more in healthcare. Now, recently, the major media has brought out some of the serious problems. Number one, private equity taking over hospitals. That's a big problem because they're basically soaking the consumer. Number two, there's no price gouging rules against hospitals. And so what happens, and we've actually experienced that when I was up in Bellingham, the hospitals will tend to price gouge people when they come in, and there's no rules against it. And this is something that we need to address on the Pod TV network, because major media isn't going to address that. So let's bring in Steve, because he always has important things to say.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys, just kind of multitasking today.
No, it's okay.
Gotta
We
make a
keep them
living.
busy. We were actually talking about Narcan, because I was telling and hospital costs, because I was talking about South Korea and their strike with the doctors, but we were also talking earlier about fentanyl and the possibility of Narcan, because Duke just implemented putting them all over the campus and everything. So
it's funny that you mentioned that. One of the reasons I jumped off is, I do governmental relations work and lobbying for my career, and one of my clients is actually, that's why I was on the phone, is an opioid company that leverages artificial intelligence and data to help cities and counties predict when people are going to have an opioid attack, and so they're working with counties to get the money that's coming in from the settlements in North Carolina and around the country. But yeah, so this is a huge crisis, and it's one of those that kind of, with all these issues going on, Mark, with and I mean, yeah, Narcan is I've seen it being used, and it's being put around there as a standard. But at the end of the day, I can tell you that this is the worst epidemic in the United States. I mean, in terms of, in addition to gun violence, it's killing so many people. And in my own home state of West Virginia, it's just killing West Virginia, fentanyl and all these drugs coming in. So I hope that whoever the president is, we can actually start focusing more. Now, our attorney general, who's running for governor, has negotiated billions of dollars of settlements into North Carolina, suing the pharmaceutical companies, right? So we'll see what happens if Stein becomes governor. But
yeah. And by the way, I'm going to mention another African country because we've also talked a number of times about the LGBT issue and the that part of the population, even here in the United States. And I didn't quite understand what Lee Newton Rhodes was talking about, and maybe he can explain it because he said that a Wake Forest nurse jabbed a patient over the pronoun pin and everything in that line. So that might have been a part of that same conversation. But in Ghana, because every country doesn't have the same kind of views and everything, but apparently the Ghanaian parliament passed a anti-homosexuality bill. So definitely there are some people that are giving it international condemnation after it was passed by the parliament, but definitely, there are some countries, because we know there's some European countries that are very liberal with that particular population, but there are some other countries that are very conservative in their views. So I guess if you're part of that group and you're going to Ghana, you might not want to go there, because apparently if they find out, they might be placing you in jail and everything. But Rick, you've traveled quite a bit, but what are your thoughts? Because like I said earlier, different countries have different views on a number of issues, but that is definitely not seeing something that is seen universally in terms of acceptability and everything. But I just wanted your take on that. Rick?
We're one of those countries where we might not be passing anti-gay legislation, but I mean, some of the redneck states do, and the redneck states are definitely trying to pass anti-trans legislation, because people are, the way to gin up, the mob is to attack a small, powerless group. The Jews in Germany, in Nazi Germany, trans people here, they're less than 1% of the population, but you can get people upset about them. And since they're less than 1%, they don't have a lot of political power to fight back. So states like Oklahoma and Idaho, they have.
It's not just Oklahoma and Idaho. Steve, we're seeing that in North Carolina. Mr. Stein's opponent, or more than likely opponent. I know there's several that are running. Mark Robinson has said several things about trans, if they want to go use the restroom, should basically go use the outhouse, is pretty much what he said, and everything.
I think let's take a macro view, though. I mean, I think this is important to talk about. It'd be interesting to see what's going on around the world on this issue, since it is World Edition. But what is interesting, Mark, is that Bill Maher, look, I understand. I don't think that we should have any hate towards people of LGBTQ or transgender. I mean, honestly, I think people should be whatever they're comfortable with. And if they're law-abiding citizens of our country, we shouldn't be mistreating them or discriminating against them. With that being, and I agree with Rick Rosner, there's a lot of legislation out there in North Carolina. We called it HB2, kind of anti-trans. And to go to your point, Mark Robinson calling LGBTQ people of filth, saying that if he's governor, he's going to do whatever he can to lock them up and do whatever. I mean, it's ridiculous. But I will say this. One of the challenges the Democrats have is that when Fareed Zakaria asked Bill Maher, why are people supporting Trump, despite the fact that even though Joe Biden is old, he's more civil. Even like Mitt Romney was praising him, that he's a gentleman. Why are people so mad? But some of these issues get too close to home. And, like if you look at Wake County School Board, there's a lot of parents upset about the fact that rather than focusing on education, they're focusing all on LGBTQ and these kinds of books in the classroom. So by these issues are so much more progressive, you alienate the moderates and conservatives, which is why Bill Maher says Republicans who don't even like Trump are standing by him because they feel that. And so this is the challenge of being a Democrat because the party is so divided.
It's a garbage issue, though. It's a fake
It is.
issue.
I agree.
By the
I agree.
Republicans.
Rick, I agree with you. I don't think that it really matters at the end of the day whether someone is a transgender, lesbian, gay, queer, bisexual. I mean, they're human beings, and I don't think we should hate them. And you may not agree with their lifestyle, but I don't think they should be discriminated against. And that's
But
the way
Rick,
I
along
feel.
those same lines, Rick, for 1 second, along those same lines, I'm going to kind of pivot it, but not totally pivot it. There are some people that are saying, and I heard what you said earlier, that Nick, about war being hell, but there are some people that are thinking that if there is going to be a ceasefire, it needs to be during this particular time of the year, because if you follow the religions of the world and everything, this month that we are going to go into is literally the holy month. So definitely this is a month that will be a flashpoint. And there have even been some people that have said that because of Ramadan about to take place and everything, that this might be a perfect time to cool down some of the tensions and everything. But I'm sure there are others that are very much, more
when is Ramadan?
reactionary and everything. They might even do the opposite and along those lines. But definitely,
isn't Ramadan in May? So don't we still have a couple more months to go? March.
You know,
Okay, March. Well, that's better.
March,
so it's sooner.
It's coming up.
But here's what's going to happen with we're going to calm down about trans people eventually. Like people used to be illegal for couples to date across and marry across racial lines. Now nobody gives a crap, and in fact, advertisers love it. Advertisers love biracial couples because then they can hit more than one demographic in an ad. Mm-hmm. And so when we calm down about biracial couples, we calm down about gay couples, and eventually, like some celebrity is going to date a trans person. Some, good-looking, famous male actor is going to start dating some woman who was born with a penis and still has a penis,
in the
and
office.
everybody will
I
freak out
mentioned
for a
yesterday,
while.
Rachel Levine is in the military. Not saying that they are attractive, but they are definitely in the military and have a high-ranking position in the our U.S. military.
Yeah, if you look at the trans soldiers we have,
that's what I was referring to. Exactly.
Yeah, well, I think the real problem the Republicans have, it's overrepresented.
Female to male soldier.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely hear you though. Hey, just really quickly, just pivot just slightly. We still got a few more minutes to go and everything. Actually, I got a thing that was lighthearted, but I definitely want to hear Nick and Rick's thoughts about this because I was actually thinking about it earlier and all along those lines. And we kind of alluded to it at the beginning of the story. But before we get to the lighthearted issue, apparently, and some of our Australian people are not here, but the Philippine president is telling Australia their strategic partnership is more important now than ever. So Philippines Marcos, who is the son of the legendary leader that was there earlier and everything, says he remains firm in defending sovereignty. So the president of the Philippines, Ferdinand Marcos Jr., is deepening maritime ties with Australia as he vows not to yield to China. So it sounds like they are leaning toward that part of the world, meaning Australia. And he says that they will not cede 1 square inch. So we do know that sometimes people are concerned about China taking over Taiwan. Apparently the Philippines are thinking that they might come their way as well. And they're like, nope, they're not going to cede 1 little square inch. And definitely it sounds like they are leaning toward Australia for aid and all along those lines. So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. Now, the lighthearted thing I was going to bring up, and like I said, we only got 5 minutes, but maybe y'all can talk about this for 5 minutes, is today is leap year. And I mean, this is leap year, and today is
leap year.
It's leap day and everything. So I was thinking earlier today, and correct me if I'm wrong and everything in that space, because today is February 29th. So technically speaking, if you were born in 1964, because I did some calculation earlier and everything, I think today is technically only your 15th birthday or something along those lines. It might be 20. I got to do the math. I was doing that earlier, but I don't remember what I came up with and everything. But because you're only born, your birthday literally only comes once every 4 years and everything. So I just wanted your take on that, Rick, because, you know, what would it be like? It's almost like being Rip Van Winkle and everything, because your birthday actually only comes once every 4 years. I don't know what they do on the other 3 years and everything. Maybe they celebrate it on the 28th, but technically speaking, yeah, because if you were born in 1964, you would actually be 60 this particular year and everything. But since it's every 4 years, you're 15.
Very
That's
good.
wonderful. Speaking of age, I want to end today before I leave about, I'm going to leave a few minutes early, but, you know, I had an amazing conversation a few days ago with an individual who is close friends with Jason Carter, President Carter's grandson. And what was amazing to me is that Jason is now kind of running the Carter Center. He was the former state senator, ran for governor of Georgia, lost. He's the grandson of Jimmy Carter. I think he's Chip Carter's son. And he, you know, what he said was that President Carter's actually doing pretty well. He turns 100 in October. He's conscious and awake. He's still in hospice. But there was a little bit of concern the day that Rosalind died. He normally rings a bell and they didn't hear anything. And so they thought he might have passed away. And then he was fine. And so he still watches the news. He gets around a little bit and is enjoying the final days of life on this earth. But as a 100-year-old president, I just couldn't believe that this guy's clock is still ticking.
He's still ticking, and who knows, maybe he's going to go for 120,
and maybe God just wasn't ready to take him. Maybe we need an angel among us. I will say this. President Carter was the only president of the United States to do more as an ex-president as president. And I think we should all be very grateful for him and his late wife, Rosalind, for all the things that they've done, whether it's building homes or helping us with, elections around the world. When I was at Emory University, the Carter Center, unbelievable, right? I will end with this. I remember he used to teach a class at Emory, and I was a college tennis player, and I was always late to the class. And I was a bit of a
President Carter's class?
I was a bit of a smart ass. I was really cocky. Okay. I was obviously, she's now my wife, dating probably one of the prettiest girls in the whole university, my wife. And I was just on top of the world. You know, I was just strutting my shit around, coming in. And one day he said, "Excuse me, sir, I need to see you after class." I was like, "Oh shit, you know, what the hell is he gonna do?" And he looked at me and he goes, "Why are you always late?" And I said, "Well, Mr. President, you know, I have this and I have this, and the dog ate my homework and all that." And he said, he looked at me. He goes, "You know, that's not enough of an excuse." And then I looked at him like a smart ass, and I said, "Mr. President, didn't you make small mistakes when you were younger?" And there was a moment of silence, and he said, "No, I did not. I grew up poor on a farm. I had to work 4 jobs. I went into the United States Navy. I became a Navy engineer. I did all these things. I became a governor. I became the president of the United States. I lived he goes, I don't know if you noticed this, son, but I lived in a house. I lived in a White House for 4 years. I didn't make small mistakes." And he says, "If you're late one more time, I will take you out of this class." I was late and I was terminated from the class. So I eventually got back in.
We got back at you. Speaking of which, and we can talk about it, because definitely that was a very powerful story.
All right, I gotta go, guys. That's my story. But
that's not only a good story. That's a great story.
Jimmy Carter, maybe, you know, I mean, let's pray. You know, he's used the presidency as a way to help others, and I think it's a lesson to all of us. So may he continue each day. And like I said, maybe God just wasn't ready for him in the pearly gates of heaven and said, "We're leaving one of our angels down here to watch over us." God bless him.
There's nothing to stop. Jimmy Carter can run for president again. He only got elected once, and he's only 99. So he you know, there's still a chance.
4 more years, baby. 4 more years.
4 more years. So President Carter for the year 2024, going into office in 2025, it's a possibility. speaking of which, and we can talk about this on World Politics, there is another person that was notorious, but they are apparently back in the news because they are selling products and they are selling and pumping a third-party candidate and all along those lines. But when we get on World Politics at 5 o'clock,
See you tonight,
you'll be
guys.
glad to know, Rick, that Monica Lewinsky is back in the news. I've seen that she's selling a variety of products and all along those lines, but it looks like Monica Lewinsky is trying to legitimize herself and all in that space. As we head out the door, maybe we can see what Monica Lewinsky has got going on, because apparently she's back in the news once again in a positive light, both selling products, and I think she was also campaigning for one of those third party
All right,
or
more power
lesser
to
parties.
her. You know, like she's.
What'd you say?
Oh well, all right. Well, that the third party is bullshit. Third party is a terrible idea. But if she wants to sell stuff, more power to her. As long as she's not selling like RFK Jr. or some crap like that.
No, I don't think she's
It
selling
feels
that. I
smart.
forgot what it is. But right now we're going to get on out of here. But it's been another fun and lively discussion. We'll be back at 5 o'clock with World Politics.
Bye.